All right, Jason, welcome to Unsupervised Learning.
Thanks for having me. First time on Unsupervised Learning. Super excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as most people know, we know each other very well. And you've also started your own business recently. You've got Arcanum Security up and running, so congrats on that.
Thank you. I mean, you were the one who pushed me to do it, so I got to thank you on that one.
Yeah, really exciting to see that. And you're also field CISO for Flare, which is
Correct.
super exciting. So I'm sure you've got a million companies like beating down the door to try to like be associated with you and like get you on the team and everything. So what was the thing that stood out and made you want to do it with Flare?
Yeah, so that's actually a really great question, I think. But between leaving Ubisoft, which, I'm actually wearing the merch right now, between leaving Ubisoft, the video game company, and being CISO there, and then coming back into Red Team, there was a year where I worked with a buddy of mine at another consultancy before I started my own thing. And so for the past couple of years, I've been on the red teaming side, a lot of red teaming, a lot of pen testing. And what I noticed was that kind of adversary methodologies had changed a little bit from what the very known penetration testing methodologies and red teaming methodologies had consistently shown, at least from me talking to peers and reviewing reports. I did a bunch of research in the last 2 years, and so that shift was basically adversaries are not using hacking methods, at least in the traditional sense, as their like first stop shop, right? They're looking on the dark webs for pre-owned accounts and credentials for organizations. And so I had to figure out a way to add that to my methodology when we did red team tests. And so I baked off, all of the companies that did this because I wanted to, provide the best, adversary emulation that I could. And so when I looked at all these companies, I stumbled upon Flare at a conference, met one of their reps, and started using their trial and used it. And it was an order of magnitudes better than any other vendor as far as finding creds for an organization. And they do it in a CTEM, kind of way, a credential exposure management, threat intel management way. I mean, they sell that, but they also let pen testers and red teamers use the data as well for their customers. So if I have a customer for Arcanum, I can use my relationship with them to look up creds on that company in the red team test. And so, like 5 out of the last 6 red team engagements that I had done in 2023, Flare credentials, which are pulled off of the dark web, Telegram channels, and stuff like that, they came from the success came from the credentials that came out of Flare. And so I started talking to them, and I was like, hey, really like what you guys are doing. I ended up doing I think one podcast with them. And then that transitioned to them being like, hey, would you like to come work part-time as our field CISO? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So that's how that relationship started. And now, I do content for them. I advise them on product. I do all kinds of stuff randomly. It's a startup. Everybody wears every hat. So yeah, that's how that started.
No, that's very cool. And it flows really well with what you're doing in Arcanum, right? Because you're doing red team over there, you're doing training over there, you're doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it comes in handy with the red teaming, the purple teaming, the times when we do consult a little bit on blue teaming as well, which is, threat intelligence and exposure management. And really it's been awesome. And they've been really receptive too from, when I am a customer asking for features, they're on it. They're like, hey, we'll build that soon. It's on the roadmap. So, and they're one of the only players I think that also works with, those pen testing companies, right? Where you can redistribute that threat intel data and that exposure data to use it in your engagements. So I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, I really like that red team focus. That's really powerful. So what would another protection scheme look like for a customer? So let's say you're a regular customer and you buy Flare. Is this essentially threat intel that's coming down to you to notify you that a credential has been compromised so you know to rotate it? Is that like the main use case?
Yeah, so in kind of the dark web world, right, that attackers kind of go through, there's really the stepping stone or I call it levels of data that's exposed via the dark web, right? And so this is part of that research I did in my last 2 years. And so the first level is creds that have already made it to the clear web, right? So this is stuff that you will see in Have I Been Pwned and Leaked X and, some things like this, right? And so these things are already on the public web. They're posted via paste sites. They're already on torrent listed sites and stuff like that. And so that's the first place an adversary will go to look for creds. Now, there are several other intermediaries, but eventually you get to one of the higher tiers, the higher levels. And that level is looking on Telegram, Discord, WhatsApp, and, some of the dark web forums that are invite only to find really fresh, what we call, basically they're the result of Stealer malware. And so these packs of, data from Stealer malware end up being sold, and they include credentials and cookies from a user that might be associated to your business. And so that's where attackers will end up. And then right after that is the step where they actually try to hack you, right? But they'll do all the easy stuff first.
Okay. And then, so we hear a lot about like 2FA bypass or whatever. So is this where the 2FA bypass comes in with the cookie stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So you can have your credentials stolen in a myriad of ways, right? And that is stymied by kind of traditional security advice of using 2FA, right? And I think that what a lot of people miss out on is that most of the time when credentials are stolen, other than from like a breach, right, they're stolen via Stealer malware, which owns your whole computer. And that means that the cookies in your browser, like Chrome or Firefox, are stolen from that malware and sold as well. And so that means that you can just inject a cookie into a website and never be asked for a password, right? The cookie, for those who aren't really, aware of the, technology, or I'm sure most people who watch your show, are aware of what cookies are. But in most senses, authentication cookies just tell the website that you are already authenticated and you can view a page for a certain amount of time, or an authenticated section of an application. So you have Netflix, right? And so, you leave Netflix logged in for weeks, months, years sometimes, right? And that's controlled by the cookie. When your browser visits Netflix, the first thing it does is it looks for the Netflix authentication cookie, and it says, yes, Daniel has that one. It hasn't set to expire yet. And so we know this is Daniel coming from this cookie, and we'll let him in without asking for username and password.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because like in the course of a session, or even, half a day or a day, you're hitting hundreds of things, right? And you can't be re-authing each time, so you're just sending a cookie. Yeah. So that makes sense. So I imagine in the forums they're going to have like decay numbers for how long this token's going to be valid.
Yeah, in the dark web forums, they'll sell the packs of like RedLine is the biggest credential stealing malware right now. In fact, I think CISA came out with an advisory just yesterday that or the DoD just came out with an advisory saying it's their number one focus is to fight RedLine, which is one of the credential stealer malware. And yeah, so that'll steal the cookies and the credentials and a whole bunch of other stuff too. Like when you see one of the packs being sold, it's usually sold, and it has a whole bunch of zips in it, and the zips in it have the result of the malware. You get a screenshot of the desktop. You get that person's stored Chrome credentials for all the sites they visit. You get the cookies for all the sessions that the browser is logged into, so all of their consumer apps. You get a full hardware listing of every app that's running on the infected machine. It's crazy. I mean, RedLine's a pretty advanced info stealer. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw a thing yesterday. I got it marked for the show later. Russian national Rudometov. Just got captured for RedLine.
Yep.
And evidently they've got full source code and everything. And bad OPSEC was, which has never happened before. Bad OPSEC.
No, never happened. Yeah.
That's interesting. So you just really like the flow that Flare is using here to are they better at going deeper into these forums? Like what do you think sets them above, right? Because there's a lot of people playing in this space.
Yeah, for sure. So, I don't recommend a product unless I review kind of the whole space, right? Yep. So, in another life, I probably could have been a Gartner analyst or something like that, but yeah, it is the level at which they go for their credentials. It's really the research team they're finding other novel ways too of surfacing the data that ends up on the dark web. I may or may not be aware of a new feature that's going to launch pretty soon around this whole thing of cookies coming out in a couple weeks. But to help
That's
people
exciting.
in mass invalidate cookies from B2C companies, right? So like Netflix is a great example, right? So we could, Flare could work with Netflix and give them a list of all cookies that have been compromised, and then they can feed that into a script that'll invalidate those sessions.
Whoa.
Yeah, and in real time over API too. So those are some exciting things, and that's the kind of stuff like we talk about internally. They're building quickly, but it is really the depth of the the threat research or whatever you want to call it, right? The team that gets into the forums and the telegrams and the discords is better than any other I've seen. So I mean, so it's really at the end of the day for any of those platforms, it's how deep can they get into the ecosystem. So bad that sometimes we see people talking about Flare on the dark web and like lamenting the fact that we're like exposing all their stuff. So yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Yeah. What other stuff are you thinking about right now in terms of like malware activity that Flare already catches, or you're looking forward to them catching, like other types of like forward-leaning malware attacks?
So exposure of malware that is like info stealer malware or credential stealer malware is kind of what Flare started with, but that's part of a sub category of threat intel, right? And so like threat intel includes a whole bunch of types of IOCs, right? And so over the course of this last year and this next year, we've really been focused on also providing traditional threat intel or forum monitoring or brand monitoring for a business when a campaign might start against them. Or we've been working with the U.S. government and several branches of government, tracking even some high profile threats to the nation, election integrity, you name it. We're working with big companies who I can't mention, but AI companies and fraud and abuse in AI based on threat actor like IOCs and recognition. So there's that. There's also we did acquisition really recently for attack surface management, which I know you're an expert in. And so for internal attack surface management, that'll be something we also move into offering in 2024, 2025. And so, my dream of what I've told Flare is that, I feel like external attack surface, like kind of this brand monitoring or campaign monitoring on top of the credential exposure, really great stuff that they do already. I feel like this can fit into like a dashboard and a flow of general threat intelligence that I think no one else really offers, and I'm really excited to see when we can put it all together in for one person to access it in one place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So basically, you'd be able to look at your entire attack surface, see where you have like exposures or whatever. It's almost like outside in and then inside out, right?
Yeah. I mean, imagine logging into a dashboard and seeing all your assets, everyone that has a login, understanding if breach credentials work on that login, understanding how to defend against that B2C or corporate app, invalidate sessions. Also understand what kind of threat actors are targeting which apps on your infrastructure, and you can do that both externally and potentially internally as well.
Yeah, it starts to tie in a little bit with like IAM type stuff, where you just understand all the logins and how those logins work, and which ones are federated, like which ones have or have not been compromised or whatever. Maybe even like which ones haven't been used, like they might be more vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, we already have filters for freshness. And you asked earlier, like kind of like how I consume it. Since I'm a red teamer, right, I use the credential browser feature the most for Flare. And so you log in and you just put in a domain. So like, unsupervisedlearning.com or something like that. And then it just filters down, what types of credentials have been on the dark web for it. So whether they come from breach lists, or they come from stealer logs, or they come from some other chatter or whatever, and then you get that immediately, and you can export that to just start using. But yeah, that's the way I use it. But organizations, obviously have a more holistic kind of want there as well. So we're continuing to develop a whole bunch of features, and my big pie in the sky view will we're still working towards that. The bread and butter has been the exposure management, both GUI and API, and that's what we've been focusing on for a majority of it. But we recently have extended the team and hired a bunch of new researchers as well. There's whole areas that we want to get deeper in and build more features for. So I think that sky's the limit, honestly, for Flare.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Now, is everything kind of like pull? You go to the portal to get the latest updates? Like, what if someone forgets to go to the dashboard? They just lose their login, or they're just busy or whatever. Is there also like a push, like notifications or email or that type of thing?
Yeah, we have full API access. So you could use chat ops to remind you with a webhook to remind you via Slack or Teams or whatever you use at your organization. In fact, a lot of really forward-facing companies are using chat ops to do this kind of stuff, right? For a lot of security data, not just us, but for everything, right? Where you log into Slack in the morning and there's a whole channel that would be like Flare ops or something like that, and it gets pushed like, here are the new 6 credentials that we found between the time you went to sleep and the time you woke up, and that have appeared on the dark web. Here's where they come from, and then you can add that to your team's list to check to see if those sessions have been compromised or whatever.
So I know you're doing a whole bunch in AI as well, and AI automation on the Arcanum side. Have you all been thinking about any sort of chat ops sort of optimizations? Like, something drops into the channel, can we actually go in and validate that credential or something?
Yeah. So that is usually in the B2C kind of world, like a Netflix or an Amazon or anything like that, right? That is usually up to the client, to implement, right? Because each app is different, and we would have to know, kind of the general app login flow. So usually that part is left to them. But for the corporate logins, where a lot of people need to log in via an identity provider or SSO or something like that, that is more easily for us to find. And, maybe in the future that could be something that we offer an automated service for, so testing the credentials and stuff like that.
Have like an agent there listening, watching that channel, taking actions, right?
And it could easily be done with some of the AI that exists right now, honestly. It's just, I think that a lot of people, the features we have right now in the platform for AI are more based around translation and correlation of data. So we do have an AI agent that's built into Flare. And so when you go into any of the views, first of all, the first great thing about it is, let's say you're dealing with a threat actor post that's in Russian. Well, AI can our AI, which is called, I think it's called Alexandria internally, we call it, but it can translate that instantly. So you can read the context of the conversation about your company. And then it can also tie together disparate sources of information, whether something showed up in a Stealer log, and then there's also conversation about it in a forum, conversation about it in a chat channel, something like that. It can tie those things together. So those are all things that, were the first really easily automatable things. And then we're going to continue to deploy, I'm sure, more and more AI features. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's kind of similar. Threat intel is kind of similar to vulnerability management. It's like you do the cool thing, which is you surface this thing, but then on the other side of the threat intel and the other side of the vuln management is fix, right? Take the action. So I could imagine, like we were saying, some sort of agent that sits there and is like, it's hooked up to Jira, it's hooked up to these different control systems. It can actually push ACLs, invalidate credentials, stuff like that. But it's also early days for AI, so you don't want to be hooking up too much power for AI on production systems, right?
Yeah, definitely a double-edged sword, right? Like, for every AI feature you put out has to be tested against a multitude of things, right? So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Well, not going to let you get off without talking about Arcanum. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Arcanum is my company. The name comes from a fantasy book that you and I have both read, but if anybody else hasn't read it, Name of the Wind is probably one of the best fantasy books of our generation. And the Arcanum in that book series, which doesn't have a conclusion yet, which is really sad, is the School of Magic. And so, we at Arcanum do a ton of training. So we have 2 classes. One is an offensive security based course. And it's my 20 years of experience in doing penetration testing and web app hacking through bug bounty. And so it's my experience there, high focus on reconnaissance and some OSINT stuff, some red teaming techniques, and then also just a lot of web hacking. And that's a 3-day course that we run. And so that was the first thing that we launched Arcanum for, was that training. And then shortly after that, this year, we launched an AI training. But it's not a how to hack AI training. It's a how to use AI in your security role training. And so we call it Red, Blue, Purple AI. And that, that training basically is teaching people, whether you're a red teamer, a blue teamer, or a purple teamer, how to scale yourself, with AI. And so that's a 2-day course. And then, usually, just being honest, we're very small, still early days, but usually we'll do those trainings, and what will happen is, someone will be like, oh, that was excellent. Can you come do some consulting for us? Whether they want us to do their red team or a purple team engagement or a pen test, or, do some AI consulting. And then, so we'll do custom consulting too, for a lot of places. Yeah.
Yeah, and I could say for myself, I've attended both, and they were absolutely fantastic. Honestly, I think you're the best trainer in security.
Oh,
and
thanks.
I know we're best friends, so I'm going to be biased, but I think I'm good at being objective, and I really think you're the best trainer in security. So
Thanks,
encourage people to check that stuff out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the AI class was absolutely fantastic. Even better the second time. Just absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think I learned a lot from from you and some other people too, about creating very fresh content, right? So you have Augmented, which is an AI course that focuses on more than just security. But I think what I learned is that there is a craving for training that stays up to date, right? Because like a lot of the training organizations that exist right now, they just create a training and then it's out there and then they never update it, right? And security and AI move so crazy fast. And it's like, okay, so by the time you take that training, a lot of the tools are outdated, a lot of the methodologies are outdated, especially in the AI. Like AI by far is like, every class I teach, which is once a quarter live, I have to basically redev the whole class because there's new, advents in prompt engineering, there's new advents in RAG, new advents in agents, all that stuff. And so I think that's what makes my trainings different than other people's, right? Because, I'm doing that. And then also I think one of the crazy cool things was, well, cohort 1 you were in as a guest. And so in all my courses, whether it's the offensive security one or the AI one, every day I bring in 1 or 2 guests who offer either like a different viewpoint than me or who are specialists even above me in some cases. And we will talk for about 30 to 40 minutes as like an interview included in the class. And I will ask some very hard questions to them that only, that only really like a homie would give you the answer to in a small group setting. Yeah. And I think that has also made the classes great. So like, last one in the offensive security class, we had Sam Curry, ZLZ, come on talking about his hacking methodology. And he's the guy who just did the big Kia hack with his group of, hackers, which was Ian Carroll and some other people too. We've had Shubham Shah, and he talked about like pretty hardcore reconnaissance methods that weren't talked about anywhere else. And so luckily I know people, you came on cohort 1 and talked about your philosophy for agents, flows, and everything like that. I'm from Augmented, but you gave away some secrets there too. So that's how I like to run a class. Like it's like a small, intimate group, and
it does. It feels extremely close knit and intimate. And after like the second hour, and definitely after like the first day, you feel close with all the other people because it's a very sort of welcoming thing. Like there's just discussion happening. And everyone's listening to you, but it's also just it's just a really good vibe. It's the best training vibe. And I've been taking SANS since, early 2000s. And it's the best training vibe we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things too is that I don't ever consider myself that I'm going to be the absolute master. I think overall my methodologies and the structure of the training is very well put together. But if someone comes in chat, for one of the courses and is like, hey, have you thought about this thing? Sometimes we'll divert and look into like a new tool or a new piece of methodology right in the class. And, you can't get that anywhere else. So I think that vibe is, I'm never going to consider myself the ultimate expert. And that vibe is helpful for people who also come to the course and are experts. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah.
Awesome. And what is next for Flare? Like you talked about, you hinted at a few different things, but what do you see happening?
Yeah.
Like you talked a little bit about your pie in the sky version of mixing like CTEM and all the different stuff all together.
Yeah.
And any features that might be coming out end of the year or first part of next year?
Yeah, so I think that's I actually don't know what I'm allowed to talk to about, but hopefully it's fine. Is there's going to be some new features around cookie exposure because a lot of people are getting really, really great at mitigating breached credentials, but less good on the cookie exposure stuff. So some APIs there that'll help you track cookies which are fresh, which have been exposed via malware campaigns or a whole bunch of stuff. Right now, we focus a lot on the Stealer log data, but we're starting to focus more and more on career phishing campaigns by threat actors and taking that too, right? Because the two methods that adversaries use to steal your creds and cookies, one is Stealer malware. They'll get malware on your machine somehow, either via drive-by download, you download a torrent, your kid downloads a Fortnite, exe or something like that, or you get spearphished with cred capture and cookie capture in the middle, right? Which is predominantly what red teams do. This is what I do in my campaigns, right? We'll set up, something like Evil Jinx and fake an Okta portal and then phish all your people. And eventually they will log in with credentials and will capture both the credential and the cookie. So that's the same thing bad guys do. I think the stats are, it's like 54% of initial access for breaches is them just buying a cookie from Stealer malware. And then 33.8% is still phishing these days to do cred capture. I'm looking at the CISA stats that I had in a browser window over here. So, so we want to get more into that data as well. We do some of it already, but we want to get even better at it. And then, more traditional threat intel features coming for Flare. And better visualizations, better dashboards, better filters. Like these are all things that are table stakes for a threat intelligence platform. And then we haven't implemented yet a ton of the attack surface. We just, Nick Ascoli is one of the guys that we purchased his ESAM product, and so we haven't implemented a ton of it yet. But over 2025, we're gonna implement a ton of it. And then, like you said, it bleeds into vulnerability management too, right? So at what point do companies like us or even other ESAM companies, at what point do they consider exposing vulnerability information, like, doing scanning of some sort for vulnerabilities, and including that in the visibility? Because at the end of the day, as a consumer of something like this, I really don't like to be logging into so many disparate platforms, right? I would love all of this to be in one place. But no one's perfected that yet. Everyone's trying it, but no one's perfected that yet. So,
yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Well, where can people learn more about Flare?
So, if you go to the main Flare page, there's a free trial. This is also something that made it really easy for me to benchmark them. Was that Flare actually offers a free trial. Anybody can sign up, but they just has to be approved by a Flare representative internally for legitimate use. But Flare was the only one that was easy to access and really start baking off. So I think that, our wonderful staff gave you a link in the doc, but I don't have it in front of me. So do you have the free trial link?
I do, yeah. So it's try.flare.io/unsupervised-learning. And that's a free 7-day trial.
Oh, awesome. So that's even better than the regular free trial. So yeah.
Okay, very cool. And where can people learn more about Arcanum?
So Arcanum, our website is Arcanum, Arcanum, -sec.com. And then you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Haddix, and so I'll talk about all this stuff randomly on there.
Awesome, man. Well, great conversation. So glad to have you on the show, and talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, man.